obligation. We put together a plan using the Berry money. We started that in last October to set a stabilization fund. And the intent of the fund was to, in fact, at least from my perspective, to increase our capital spending in the area of our facilities. So I think as we get to that point, that we should be prepared to come in with recommendations. I know there's an overall capital plan, but there are a number of things that clearly need to be done. I know we got to fix the soffits finally, get rid of the birds living in town hall and things like that. And the roof is on the list now to be done. But there are other things they need to be made visible so that we can address them. It would be at least my intention to propose that we bond some of these building maintenance issues.
Yeah.
If not in April, in October.
We'll need, just so you know, when we go forward with that capital request, we're going to need some architectural services in there. We're just going to need some help to develop where we should go first and how much we should spend in certain areas before we're throwing money away versus, again, building towards some creditable return of the building. The other thing we need to do, and we'll have to do, in terms of maintaining the buildings, are the warranties, for example, and our responsibility to make sure that we're not neglect in maintaining anything, for example, at the new police station, that would impact the warranties that are out there. So it isn't as though we're going to say, we don't have the money, therefore we can't do it. No, we have to do it. If it means this account is spent out and we have to come back in October, that's what I'm saying. We have to spend the money.
As far as the repairs and maintenance budget, that 52,400, I guess it's more towards Greg, but the difference is $25,000 between the level services and what's being proposed. Is that just a $25,000 flat? No. Were there specific items that were called out and decided to defer?
There was $25,000 that was earmarked for repairs to HVAC facilities in town buildings, and that's the amount that was taken out, was the funds that were for HVAC. Again, as the chairman pointed out, our thought was that we could roll those items into a capital request and put that forward at the October town meeting. We saw the merits of it, but it just turned out that we couldn't make the budget work with those dollars remaining.
So the hope is, again, not to necessarily defer the maintenance.
No, just to defer it until we can get
pay for it a little differently.
Pay for it a little differently than what we have. And I think I just wanted to clarify something Dave said. We don't have a building maintenance. We don't have a lot of personnel. We don't have a staff. So in this department, through Dave's efforts and John Welcher's efforts, if something's wrong, we need to call in service people and contractors to do this work. We don't have a fleet of personnel who are trained. Some departments have plumbers and electricians, and those people work on staff. We don't have those tradespeople. This is a bare bones department as it exists right now. I think they do pretty well with what they have.
This is more along the lines of the fact that in that one area there's a wide diversity of skills and tools that are required.
Correct.
And therefore, it's more effective and efficient to use outside services.
Yeah. Just like us, I mean, how many times we do a bridge? And hire a structural engineer to
Where the opposite takes place in the case of vehicle maintenance.
Exactly.
You know, it's interesting though, when we have major projects like roof projects, painting projects, outside painting projects, we bring in outside contractors. Anything that we bid out, we have to bid out with prevailing wage. Typically, the prevailing wage laws result in us paying about 25% in addition to what a normal project cost would be, just because the wage rates are high. So it's a double-edged sword that as we call in these outside contractors to do major work for us, there's a price to that, and we pay for that.
Any other questions regarding public buildings, or Dave, you have any other comments?
No?
Is that
Are we
wrap on your
Are we
budget?
gonna have, to the TA, I guess, someday, are we going to have our department heads address, the benchmarking reports and maybe just talk about, what some of the differences or nuances to what was reported in that in relation to their budget? And I knew in this particular case.
I have a couple questions regarding that.
Okay, I was just wondering how we're gonna handle this going forward in the budgetary process. To me, I would like, I assume, I hope I'm correct, that the department heads, along with the administration, have gone through the report, looked at the different nuances to the findings, and maybe taken a look at, first of all, explaining whatever differences there may be, as far as deviating from the norm, and then, has there been any other contact with other communities in relation to what they may do it differently than what we do? Maybe we're doing it well.
I'll be glad to, I was prepared to address benchmarking when I was done with the deliberation on the operating budget. So I'll be glad to do that when we're done with this.
But, I mean, I just think.
And I think
it's the
everyone
appropriate
will.
time to just discuss it, even if it's just initially.
The next is a fun area for the board, sanitation. If you look at your handout, your last page, handout, I'm going to bring you back to where we were when we previously met, which was some months ago. And since then, I have met numerously with finance. As we put the budget together, right now, the program is extremely successful. Solid waste program is extremely successful in that it's financially sound, the 1 day a week service with every week recycling has been a home run. Our public relations, our customer satisfaction is at an all-time high, and the town is clean. And the rate has been able to be stabilized at 180 per household per year. Now, the question during the presentation of looking at pay-as-you-throw, the board asked me, specifically with the recycling committee present, and I think it was Bob Messeri, Bob asked me what is the best form of recycling. I said, well, pay-as-you-throw. If you want to maximize recycling, to my knowledge, the best program would be pay-as-you-throw. You're forcing people to buy bags. They don't want to buy bags, therefore they'll recycle more. They're also going to throw it in swamps. They're also going to go into the woods and hide it. They're also going to put it in our public disposal dumpsters. We'll put locks on them, and the next day there'll be 20, 30 bags surrounding the dumpster on the ground for you to pick up, and unlock, and put it in. I've been through this in a number of communities, and I'm not saying it can't work, but if you flip to pay-as-you-throw in this hybrid, and I'll go over the details with you in a minute, I just want to stay philosophically on the differences. If you have a program that's successful and it's financially sound, if you're going to change it, you want to change it so it's equally or better than what it is now. I can't guarantee that if you make a change. I just can't guarantee that, because I can anticipate some of the problems, and if I do, then we need more resources to interface with us. We're not empire builders here, and that means then we'd have to take public works forces, probably some help from police resources, to do police work in terms of rubbish. You're going to have to clean up the messes and take it somewhere. Police department's gonna have to probably do random sampling of rubbish to find out who it is and fine them, and so forth and so on. Just some examples. So, I recommend, and the recommendation from the DPW right now is status quo. I can't see immediately going into pay-as-you-throw. We have $201,402 in stabilization, Neswick stabilization. That will be reseated because we bumped up the current budget anticipating high tonnage. The recycling committee been tremendously effective in public relations. We've sold, I can't tell you how many extra bins families have out there. If you drive around town, you'll see every week 2 bins out per household in many households, which is great. Our tonnage is down. The tonnage down, and the money that we had asked to seed up to cover those additional tonnage, when the year is over, will not go into the general fund. They'll go back to Neswick stabilization. So that 201 is what we have now. Joe, does that 201, does that 201 include 120,000 for this year's budget or not?
No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't.
So roughly half of that would go into this budget, and some of that would be returned at the end of the year. So I'm not sure on the numbers. For the sake of discussion, it could be a wash, and we could still be looking at another 200,000 next year. We could be looking at that much. I'm not sure.
Question for Joe, before you go on. Money that isn't spent, right, goes directly back into
Yes.
the stabilization, or does it go into free cash and then we have to make an October transfer?
If we go into free cash,
No. Town meeting's language,
what's the language?
we adjusted the language at town meeting so that that would not happen.
Are we sure of that?
And if,
or-
and if I'm not correct, then we need to do it for April town meeting.
Well, if we did the language in October, then that should be sufficient.
My understanding is that that was the language that we did. If it's not correct language, then we need to do it in April to make sure that happens.
Well, and
But we could always get it back through the free cash.
I
fund.
understand, that's why I raised the question, is it something we need to be paying attention to and
Yes.
make a move in October, or is it something that can be done automatically? Let's get that answered then.
I
And
think
if there is a way of doing it with the language, fine, then obviously let's fix it.
Joe, my understanding in this past October, the language was correct, that at the end of this year, the money automatically goes. Now, if I stand corrected here,
If we put in, I don't recall the exact wording, but if we did word it that way, then we're fine. Yeah.
I think it needs to be double checked, and I think if we can correct it, we should correct it for the current fiscal year and do it in April.
right?
Yeah, I don't have a problem.
Absolutely. Yep. That, because that feeds the ability to offset the budget for another 1 to 2 more years after this year.
Right.
Now, then
We
ultimately,
want to see,
right,
Yeah.
and then ultimately, if you want the rate stabilized,
yeah,
and-
but just in order to keep things stable and keep the rate stable, we need to do it, because that'll extend the period of time.
then it also gives you that extra time then to do 1 or 2 things. You want to stay with the current program, then, and you want the $180 to continue flat, then it's going to have to go back to taxation. Or do you ultimately want to look at it as all of it back on taxation? You may need an override to do that.
But
If
we
you-
still, I mean, we're not gonna make that decision here tonight.
No,
this-
but those are just
this
looking
morning,
out.
but-
And flipping then, of course, that gives you that window of 2 years or so to flip to see if you want to go with this, with the programs such as this, the hybrid. Now, just to spend a little time on the hybrid, I know I make reference to comments that some of you folks have made. Joe on the facilities, on the garage, you on certain things, and Stephen on some things. Not to slight you, Mike, but these conversations have been going on for a lot of years. And